Good afternoon, everybody. Summer learning, evidence-based action, and the quest for proof. So those are really two separate sets of lessons learned over time that we'll talk about. And I'm going to name a couple of names because I'm about implicating the guilty. And there are some accomplices in the room as well. So as I tell this story, I'll point out a few people who have been integral to some of this work. But if I flash back to 2009, 2010, when I was on staff at the Barr Foundation, I had the privilege of working with Boston After School and Beyond's Executive Director, Chris Smith, as well as the Boston Opportunity Agenda's consultant, Steve Greeley. Steve, wave at everybody. Steve, you're there? Wave. He doesn't? Yes, good, there you go. And we convened over a series of conversations, leaders from the Boston Public Schools, from philanthropy, and from youth-serving nonprofits. These conversations explored a couple of things, one of which was, what's our collective aspiration for young people? We also wanted to ask ourselves, how do we take the best of what school does and better combine it with the best of what out-of-school time programming does to actually produce our mutually desired aspirations for young people? The headline on this is that about a couple of dozen organizations in the Boston Public Schools agreed on a couple of things. That's not always easy to come by. The first agreement was we wanted holistic results for young people. So we weren't just talking about academic results. We were talking about skill-based results. We were talking about social-emotional learning results and physical wellness results. The other agreement was that we needed to make sure that there was more deliberate collaboration across the school day and after school time and other spaces to make sure that we were bringing more youth development into traditional classroom settings, but that we were also moving more academic support and opportunities for academic learning beyond school. And so the question that was before us then was, where do we start? How do we start to build this whole student system that optimizes Boston's learning ecosystem? The answer that quickly emerged was summer. It emerged for a political reason, and it emerged for an evidence-based reason, and it emerged in that order. So the political reason was that the Boston Public Schools said, well, the school year is off limits. Nobody's playing in the school year, at least not now. This was the first year of the state's turnaround school regime. And so for the first time, Boston had 12 turnaround schools that now the district had to figure out, what are we going to do about this? And we're overwhelmed at having to take this on, but maybe also having to think about, now we've got to figure out some stuff with partners and figure out their mutual interests and goals as well. We're just not going to do that. But what they willingly conceded was that nonprofits were doing superlative work in summer, and in fact, what we had for summer school at the time was not meeting anybody's expectations around remediation or student engagement. So we wanted to start there. We also had some evidence-based backing with us because we were appealing to a growing body of research about summer learning. And just that year, Time Magazine published an article called "The Case Against Summer Vacation." Now, personally, I didn't want to be a part of any initiative that was going to make a case against summer vacation because I didn't want, every kid in Boston hating on me. But basically what this article did was brought to the public consciousness a set of findings that said that cumulatively, summer learning loss contributes to about 2/3 of the achievement gap. And this was really a headline that was built on the body of evidence that the Wallace Foundation, the National Summer Learning Association, and the Rahn Corporation were really bringing to the fore for the field. So here we are. We're armed with consensus. We're armed with evidence. We're armed with the very little bit we knew about how summer learning loss was actually playing out in Boston, because in fact we didn't know a whole lot. And we were armed with the most dangerous thing of all, which was funding. So we created in 2010 the Summer Learning Project. 5 schools, 7 nonprofits partnering together to serve 232 students that summer in a 5 or 6 week summer program. We gave them 3 charges. We said, first of all, create a blended learning experience. It has to be fun and engaging. It has to have academic components. And it has to be so seamless that kids don't know that they're learning while they're having fun. The second thing that we said was take learning out of the classroom. Design blended learning experiences for experiential settings, like Thompson Island, like museums, like our college campuses. But please do not do this in anybody's school building. The third thing that we asked of them was focus on helping young people develop non-academic skills and social emotional skills. Wow, 5 minutes. I'm going to have to hurry through this. So flash forward, here's the first piece. We thought we knocked it out of the park. We were convinced that we had done so. But if you want to be grounded, talk to a researcher and evaluator. They know how to blow people's highs. As a former evaluator myself, I was a professional high blower. So I know what this looks like. We talked to Jennifer Sloan McCombs, who was the lead researcher at the Rahn Corporation, debriefing that first summer. And so I'm going to tell you in a nutshell what she told us more professionally and more tactfully. She said, what you are doing in Boston is cute. It may even be innovative, but it is not evidence-based. And so what she said to us is that the evidence actually says if you're going to do high-quality summer learning, it has to be standards aligned, it has to have a curricular base, and you need dedicated time for instruction. Our immediate reaction was expletive that. You fill in your favorite expletive there. Because we weren't trying to recreate school during the summer. That was the whole point of what we were doing. But we had to humble up and realize that we had been conveniently appealing to the evidence base instead of actually calling the evidence base, asking hard questions about what it says, and very deliberately applying the evidence base to the design of the programs and systems that we were building. So we started to get in the ritual habit of annually asking, well, what are the insights that the field is starting to develop for us, and what are our data telling us locally about how we need to proceed from here? So, we're reluctant revolutionaries. We didn't want to do what we were being told, but we're not abject fools. So we modified. So our blended learning did take on more of a curricular base, and we did some other things, which was great. So now we're growing this thing. Flash forward, we started with 5 sites and 232 students in 2010. By 2012, we're talking 1,500 students at 25 sites. By 2014, we're talking about 3,500 students and 60 sites. So we're knocking it out of the park. We're crushing it. We're geniuses, as far as I'm concerned, and all hail the Summer Learning Project. But here's the other set of lessons about the quest for proof. Almost from day one, the funders at the Opportunity Agenda were asking us, is summer learning loss being reduced, and can you prove that what you are doing actually works? We didn't have a straightforward answer to that. I mean, the answer was really, we don't know whether we are reducing summer learning loss, and no, we can't prove a damn thing. But there were reasons for that. That we had to work out in the beginning of this. So first reason was BPS's testing regimen didn't actually bookend the summer. You tested in February, which was your last assessment, and then you tested somewhere in October. We had no idea whether the kinds of results we were seeing were school year influenced or summer influenced. We didn't have very sensitive instruments to help us understand how much progress students could make between June and August. We adopted some stuff, we tried to make up some stuff. Achievement Network came to the rescue and tried to help us create an instrument that wasn't quite what we needed. We also couldn't track students into the school year, so we couldn't put in the student information system who participated in summer and then ask what was happening to them during the school year. Finally, we weren't really set up for experimental design in those early phases. Now, I could talk to you a lot about how we remedied a lot of that, but I want to point to 3 higher level things that I want to leave you with. The first is that the quest for proof is really about growing into methodological sophistication and making a commitment to long-term learning. So when I was evaluation director at the Barr Foundation, grantees would come in to me and say, other funders, not us, but other funders are asking us to do an RCT. And they were panicked about it. The truth of the matter is a couple of them were being asked to do RCTs. Most of them were not. They were simply being asked to get more serious about evaluation and learning so you could more accurately identify your strengths and weaknesses and have a more accurate commentary on your results. But panic-stricken nonetheless. And what I would remind people is that you can't go from 0 to 60 on evaluation if you've never been a part of a formal evaluation or never conducted a formal evaluation. So you've got to build the capacity and the learning over time. And so, first of all, you have to have a program. Hello. So one of the problems with evaluation, I think you all well know this, if the program isn't stable, the design keeps shifting, the way you implement it keeps shifting. We're not talking about one program, we're talking about 5 programs, we're talking about 10. It's hard to evaluate a moving target in that way. So first, let's spend the time in creating some programmatic stability. Then we've got to get to the point where we start to figure out how do we start to ask meaningful questions about what we want to learn about the work that we're doing. Not questions that we think funders want answered, but questions that are actually going to help us do our work better. Then we have to start building the toolbox, and we'll glaze over about logic models and indicators and all that stuff and the data systems or whatever, but we've got to build the tools of a learning organization and an organization that is used to getting feedback. We've got to learn how to select great consultants. And then if the conditions are right, somewhere down there in year 10, year 15, maybe you're ready for an RCT, but be ready for the fact that RCTs do not produce the kinds of conclusions that we think they do. And it only happens under certain conditions. And so it takes growth, and we realize that it took growth for us to develop the kind of methodological sophistication that was needed. For funders in the room, if that is going to be developed, for organizations, you have to pay for it. Most of our nonprofits are not revenue-generating organizations, and so if you want to make sure that they step up to the plate on evaluation, you've got to pay for it. The second thing to tell you is that we in the Opportunity Agenda funders were having the wrong conversation in those early years. So the did it work conversation and can you prove it conversation, those questions are time-dependent questions. Those questions are often inappropriate for the early stages and the interim stages of the work that we're doing. Early stages, you want to be asking questions about, did we create the critical outputs? The things that we know we need to create, the tools, the information, the designs that we think will be the things that enable the change that we want to see. In the early phases, we have to be asking about catalytic effects. Are we beginning to see the signs of the change that we want? The change in mindset, the change in practice, some of the institutional changes that we think will lead to the change that we want to see. In the interim phase, we need to be looking out for the tipping points. So now are we getting a critical mass of behavioral and institutional and system change such that we think it's less likely to go back to the status quo and far more likely to make progress towards the ultimate goal that we want to see. So we've got to have the right conversations at the right time. Third thing, our quest for proof often blinds us to the evidence of progress. And so while we were asking this question, are we reducing summer learning loss? Can we prove it? And we're flailing all over the place. There are positive things happening in the summer learning project. So BPS now fixes the testing system. We can actually book in summer for the first time. BPS starts changing its partnership policy in the ways that it thinks about allocating partnership dollars, not only in the summer, but in the school year, which was our intention in the first place. Schools and nonprofits come together to create what we call the ACT framework, achieving, connecting, and thriving. And this really describes the set of skills that we want all young people developing, but then you start to see the field designing learning experiences that align with the ACT framework. Phenomenal. We adopt some validated instruments for program quality and student assessment, the SAO and the HSA, or the Holistic Student Assessment that the Para Institute has done. Those instruments are now the underpinning of student assessment for social emotional learning in the Boston public school system. And it started in summer, and we saw the early adoption at the time. Moreover, we actually saw student progress on the things that were being measured. So when we looked at critical thinking, when we looked at relationships with students and adults, when we looked at perseverance, when we looked at teamwork, we saw students across the board making progress in these areas, observed and self-reported. So we were starting to get at least some hint that this experience mattered to students. And then when you push forward, BPS actually sunsets its summer school and fully adopts the summer learning program. But the question is, was that transformative change? Because I think for a lot of our allies, they kept asking not only, well, tell us about the summer learning loss thing, which we still couldn't quite do. And then bafflingly, they kept asking, well, where's the systems change? And we kept pointing to what BPS and others were doing, but somehow this still didn't look like what people envisioned the rapture to be. So very final thing here. 2016, the RAND Corporation puts out its RCT report. And it says the complicated and convoluted things that oftentimes RCT reports do. So you have to kind of get into them to really figure out what the bottom line is. One thing that it said is that third graders who enrolled in summer learning and did 20 days or more actually learned 25% more in math than their counterparts who did not participate or who did not meet the attendance threshold, and that those gains lasted into the spring of their fourth grade year. Great. Students who did 2 consecutive years of summer learning saw 20 to 25% gains in reading as compared to their counterparts as well. So the question is that proof? At this point, I kind of don't know, but it was compelling enough evidence for us to keep growing this thing such that in 2018, we served 14,500 students at 145 sites this summer. And what I know for a fact is, if it's not proof, I would argue to you all day that Boston has seen transformative and proven change in the summer. Thank you.